Welcome to Turning Base, the podcast that charts a course through the fast-changing world of aviation digital marketing. Hosted by Bryan Redeker, Turning Base is your destination for actionable strategies, expert interviews, and insights tailored for FBOs, charter operators, and general aviation providers. If you're ready to elevate your brand, streamline your messaging, and grow your presence in the skies, you're in the right place. This is Turning Base.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Turning Base podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Redeker, and I am joined once again with my brother, Bryan Redeker. How you doing today, Bryan?
Hey, pretty good, Brandon. How about you today?
Hey, we're going. Technology sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work, so we're making the best of it.
Indeed. But hey, we're rolling now. We're good to go. Springtime is arriving here in Michigan. Flying season is getting started. Wait. It's getting nice enough to go outside again, so we're excited. So we got a couple things to talk about today on Turning Base, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Today, we're going to be starting to talk about marketing, and kind of the first thing is really about being clear with your marketing. And then we're going to cover some news and the book that we had introduced last week, but we just ran out of time last week because, well, we had a lot of fun last week. And so today we're going to dive into a few more things that we didn't quite get to last week. So, when talking with clients, when we first start talking with them, one of the most important things that we got to get everybody on the same page is getting crystal clear on your marketing and how that affects their business goals, right? Because we want to make sure that the marketing supports the business and the business supports marketing. It all kind of has to work together. So if you're not clear on this, you may be paying something that I've been kind of calling in some posts in the past and kind of going forward is the clarity tax. So I see these marketing companies and agencies, and they're telling really anybody, FBOs, charter companies, that they need to win the field. But I mean, let's be honest here. At most airports, you're the only game in town. Like there's usually only one FBO at that airport. So if that
unless you're in a
lands at your
metropolitan
airport,
area. If you're in Chicago, you might have a few airports, but for most places, especially the general aviation world, you're not going to have a lot of general aviation airports. And besides that, you're not really probably flying your Cessna 172 into O'Hare when there's executive airports and general aviation airports that are within the area, around a metropolitan area. So you're not having to deal with heavy commercial traffic. So, but for the vast majority of airports, Brandon's right. You're kind of the only game in town.
You are. You're not gonna I just landed at an airport. I'm gonna go across the field and save 5 cents a gallon on my jet fuel or 110 octane, right? Like you go to the airport you go to. So, we got to make sure that we get clear about this so that we can, they're going to your airport and maybe not the airport a county over or a city over. That's kind of where we need to make sure we're clear. So it isn't about losing the guy. Clarity tax is not necessarily losing the guy who's already on your ramp, but it's an arrow that's on their way to Oshkosh, and he's planning his flight out of where he's going to stop. And, is he going to stop at your airport or one that's, just a few miles away to pick up his last load of fuel before he's heading over there? Because he doesn't know exactly what you have.
Yeah, exactly, Brandon. It's really in the flight planning stage that a lot of those decisions are made, especially if you're going to do any cross-country travel. You brought up Oshkosh, of course, is a great example. A huge amount of general aviation aircraft flying in. And where we're at, we get a lot of aircraft that this is one of their last stops before flying over Lake Michigan to Oshkosh. And so the flight planning and making those determinations of where you're going to stop for fuel, where you're going to stop, how close are the local restaurants? If you say, this is the last stop I'm going to make before I fly over, Lake Michigan, or if I fly over an area that doesn't have a lot of options, what are my stops for fuel, food, restrooms, things like that? And so that really is happening in the flight planning stage. It's not like you're driving on a car on the highway and you say, oh, you know what? there's an off ramp with a gas station and a fast food restaurant and everything I need, right? You can
And
make that
yeah, I'll
decision
just
pretty
stop
much on the
there.
fly.
Yeah, it's a little different in flight planning. Now, there are those times where, you might be doing a cross country and all of a sudden, you know, um, nature calls and you gotta, get on the ground quickly, especially I would assume traveling with other passengers and especially kids. They don't always give you the most lead time, but for the most part, it's in that pre-planning and, kind of going back to that golf stream that I talked about earlier. They're gonna file a flight plan ahead of time, so it's gonna be all planned out. So, if they're picking what city and what business they're gonna go to, they might be a little bit more picky about what airport they're gonna land at because they gotta make sure they can safely land there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because just because it's a general aviation airport doesn't mean it's open for every possible combination of aircraft. Business jets, private jets, things like that have different requirements and may not even have the fuel. If you have a turboprop, you're gonna need to make sure that you have the fuel that you need for that particular
Yeah,
aircraft. So
yeah.
a lot of that comes into being able to, and there's a lot of resources that are out there, of course, but trying to make it
Oh,
as
yeah.
easy as possible so that pilots, when they are doing their flight planning, can look at it from a couple different avenues and say, yeah, this airport has a runway that's long enough. It has the fuel that I need. It has a close proximity to a restaurant. Do they have transportation
Yep.
services available to them? And some of that information, there's NOTAMs and there's little airport directories and there's all sorts of little things, but sometimes making it a little bit more user friendly, or if your airport has a website that makes it a little bit easier for them to identify, like, yeah, this has got the things that matter the most for me. If I'm
Oh,
picking
yeah.
my flight plan, I'm going to make my heading corrections so that I'm heading towards that location versus that location over here, because this one has the things that I'm looking for during my journey.
Yes. Yeah, so if you're gonna go get that $100 hamburger, which with the price of fuel, we may have to change that
Uh,
to maybe
$200
$150 hamburger
hamburger.
today.
Yeah,
$100 hamburger.
it better be
So
good.
do you have a restaurant on yeah, it better be good, really good, so or they, getting a proficiency flight in and they're just gonna go get the cheapest fuel, right? How do they when they do that planning, are they trying to get that now $200 hamburger or the cheapest fuel? What services do you have during that flight planning that matches what they're looking for? And so you could be losing revenue before they even take off the ground and head to your airport.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really not
So
a case
let's
of,
let's kind of
yeah, it's a little case of, bad marketing or not the proper marketing or just basically not getting the information in front
yeah,
of your audience. And your audience is a customer, right? The pilot that's flying in there is your customer. And how are you
absolutely,
you
absolutely.
explaining and marketing and telling the story of your airport from the standpoint of the facilities, the fuel, proximity to food, ground transportation, restroom availability, blah. You start to go through this list, right? These are the things that are going to make a
So many things.
decision when you are flight planning that will make or break whether or not that aircraft lands at your
Hmm.
airport or the airport that's 30 miles away. Because it may only be a few degree heading change when he leaves his destination, he or she leaves the previous airport. That will make the difference between
Yeah.
a 30-mile gap, and you may end up at the other airport because they are doing a better job of communicating their value proposition to the pilots.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because even where we're at, right? I'm right by one airport. You're right by another airport. It's
Yeah.
only a few miles away. So
Yeah, and
which
there's
which
another
one do
one
you
that's
pick,
almost
right?
equal distance uh, south of here.
Yeah.
And so a few degree change in your heading could land you at any of those three airports. And all three of those airports have a very different
Oh yeah.
amount of offerings that they have to pilots.
Yeah. So, let's take a look at the math just real quick, just
Yeah,
using
yeah. How do the
some
numbers
rough
crunch
numbers.
out on this thing, huh?
Yeah. So, do you have any idea of like a Gulf Stream? How much fuel do you think, if a Gulf Stream is going to land at your airport, how many gallons do you think it might take on?
I'll be honest. The Gulfstream is just a tiny bit out of my realm here. So to make the math easy and to kind of make it a more realistic approach here, why don't we just call it 1,200 gallons? All right, let's just assume, because
Let's just use
chances of
1,200
me
gallons. Yeah,
filling up a Gulfstream in the near future probably
pretty
unlikely.
low.
So 1,200 gallons. Let's go
Yeah.
with that. Let's run the numbers.
Let's go 1,200 gallons. Yeah, because depending on what Gulfstream model, that number varies actually quite a bit. So, we're gonna just take that 1,200 gallons as some rough numbers here. So if you're looking at $1.50 per gallon on margin, okay, and so that you're looking at on 1,200 gallons, that's $1,800 in profit, right?
Yeah,
Because we're talking the
from that
margin on
one
top of
fill
what
up.
you're charging
Yeah,
from one fill up. Yeah.
yeah.
So if you lose one of those jets every week, just one, that's about $93,000 a year in lost profit from just the fuel alone.
Yeah, and that's not even look at it from a revenue standpoint as well. What's the top line number that you would be losing, and then of course your profit as well. So yeah, what
Oh
is your
yeah.
your margin on that fuel, and it adds up. And if you looked at it from a revenue
Absolutely.
standpoint, and for airports that are operating for within a small town or medium sized town, right? There's a lot of resistance to
Oh yeah.
having an airport from the community because they just don't get
Oh
it, right?
yeah.
And you don't want the city leaders, shutting it down because they don't understand that there's revenue to be made, sales revenue to be made. There's profit to be
Hmm.
made. There's money that goes back into the airport. There's money that goes back into the governing body that the city, the township, whatever it may be, and
And potentially local businesses.
absolutely, depending on what it is, but, there's communicating that information within the business side of the airport is very important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So just that little change right there. I mean, shoot, we just talked about almost $100,000 a year just in
Yeah.
a slight change in how you're doing. And I would assume right now with um, the fuel prices going crazy up and down all the time, if you're not staying up to date on your fuel prices, especially updating it not only at the pump or on your truck, but also online, people may be seeing two very different numbers, and that's going to affect your margin too.
Yeah, absolutely, and also I think it's important to note that, you should be aware of what the other airports, in the area are as well. I know of
Yes.
I know of a case of which, people fly from one they'll pick this airport versus that airport because they say, "Hey, you know what? The fuel is a little bit cheaper. Plus, I need to go get some hours in anyway, so I could fill up at one airport that I'm
Yeah.
already at and not gain, I don't get any flight time out of that. I just simply taxi over, fill it up, put it back in the hangar, or I
Yes.
go fly over here because I have cheaper fuel, and maybe that cheaper fuel is at an airport that also has, a fast food restaurant across the street. So all of a sudden, you can see that this between two local airports, you get a case in which you got difference in fuel prices, and it's some
Yes.
different amenities, and because of that, the pilot is making the decision. I'm going to fly over to that one instead of that one, and the one airport that lost out on that has lost that revenue, has lost that margin, of course, and if you did one
Yeah.
airplane a week, even if it's not a Gulfstream, right? Let's say it's a Cirrus or a Cessna 172 or Piper Arrow.
Totally.
Pick any airplane you want, just standard general aviation aircraft. You add that up over and over and over again over the course of a year, and you're talking about a significant dollar value.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, actually, just the other day, I was talking with Brandon with his Cherokee, and he went to go do, he needed to get some fuel, and he was just like, well, I'll just go fly to the nearest airport, pick it up at, get a little proficiency. It's, maybe been 2 weeks since you've flown. And he gets to the airport, and there's a bunch of other people, and they're all like, hey, we're all going to go fly to this other airport to get gas, maybe grab some food. Do you want to come join us? Right. And so all of a sudden, now you got like 3 or 4 or 5 airplanes all going together just for fun because they're all going to top off. So now all of a sudden that uplift, you could lose potentially even more revenue just because they're just looking to get some flight time and to top off with fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. Remind me later. Uh, I have a story to tell you about Brandon's Cherokee that I forgot
Okay.
about. So, we won't waste everybody's time here because we're talking
Sure.
math, we're talking numbers, we're talking marketing. This isn't anything related to any of those, but it is a flying story, but not necessarily worth it. So I'll. That was my cue to remind me. Oh, yeah, I have a fun story to tell you. So back at it. Let's
Fantastic.
go. Let's continue on our path here, shall we?
Yeah, so, really what we're talking about is trying to make sure your marketing is clear to support your business before the pilots even take off. So they kind of want to know, can you handle my plane? What is the price of your services, fuel, landing fees, whatever, and why should I stop there? Those are really the three things right off the top that people are going to want to know right away. And we talked already about there's three airports very close to here. So which one are they going to pick? That's really the important thing about getting clear online to so that in that flight planning they have that information and they can make that decision and hopefully right they pick your airport because that's the goal here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get
So
back to that
we
clarity
need to
tax that you talked about, right? So I'm paying the
yeah.
clarity tax. What is actually happening? Is it just the website that I need? What? Talk me through that.
Yeah. So it's not just the website, right? There, like you had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of flight planning tools. So you need to kind of look at like a quick 5-10 second glance, look at it from the pilot's perspective. So you want to sit where they're sitting, look at the apps that they're using, everything from ForeFlight to Fly to Lunch, Google, your website. You got to look at everything because people have different missions when they're flying. So you kind of have to make sure you're looking at from their perspective, all of those different kinds of missions that they might be doing that would lead them to your airport to make sure they come to where you're at and buy fuel, you know, get you a $200 hamburger at the restaurant that's on your property.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's more than the website is just one spot, and a lot of airports may invest in a website, or they may use the community website, which it's like how many people ever go to
Yes.
the local community website. It's probably not the place you're looking if you're
No.
building a flight plan to fly somewhere, right? So you may look up the website, and you named some other ones as well, and it's really communicating the value proposition of your airport. Um, to a pilot. And I think you made up a good point, like meeting the pilots where they're at, meeting the pilots with where
Yeah.
they find this
Yeah.
information from. The days of having that huge airport directory book are long gone. People are online. And it's also to understand that you have younger pilots who may have a very different way of finding information than an older pilot who may still have that huge directory. And then that directory is probably so far out of date in terms of what's actually happening. So it's meeting the pilots where they're at and communicating to them, and of course, in communicating them with the things that matter the most to them. So yeah,
Yeah.
I see. We talk about an example of like a world class service. It's like, well, what does that kind of mean too? So it's about getting the language and stuff right as well, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Because there's so many things I know. Time to time, I'll show dad, something on ForeFlight or Sky Vector or, one of those other apps. And, he's just blown away with all the new technology and what you can do in flight planning today that you couldn't do 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or whatever.
Even 10 years ago, I think. But
Even
yeah, you're
10 years
exactly
ago.
right. Technology has changed quite a bit. So it's definitely meeting the pilots where they are and using the platforms that they're using.
Yeah. So, real quick, it's a tax. It's not like someone's going to bill you that tax, right? It's a tax in lost revenue that you didn't even realize you were losing it. So stop paying it. Get crystal clear on your messaging across all platforms and sit where the pilot is sitting. Look at it from their perspective to help you get really clear on that message.
Yeah, so just saying, hey, my airport offers first class, world class service. What does that mean, right? Like, whatever. First class,
Yeah,
you mean you're gonna,
exactly.
bring me snacks and a drink out to the airplane? What are you talking about here? So yeah, what really are you trying to communicate to these pilots? So you don't want to
Yeah,
just,
and you know,
don't blend into the clouds, right? Be clear
no, you
about,
don't. Yeah,
yeah.
you don't want to be a gray airplane on a cloudy day. No,
No,
no one's seeing that.
as someone who flies RC military aircraft, I'll tell you what, a gray airplane on an overcast sky, pretty much impossible. You don't want to be
Pretty
that.
much impossible.
If you're
Yeah,
marketing that type of a message and that type of a background, it's just going to get lost
yeah.
in this clouds, right?
Yeah, and you had mentioned something about younger pilots and using different things, and I think we can jump into actually one of the news articles that I had ready for this week was the FAA data showing about um, different demographics. They pulled together the demographics from 2025 and they listed it, and there's a couple of interesting things. And since you had mentioned the age gap, right? The average age right now of pilots is 42 years old, and that's down from roughly 45 not that long ago. So it's shifting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely say from even our local airports, um, seeing that a lot of times I end up seeing the pilots who are coming in, student pilots who are flying and do student evening touch and go practice. And you're close enough where you can kind of see who's flying. You
Yeah,
can kind of see, is this a 70-year-old guy with white hair, or is it someone in their 20s, male, female,
yeah,
someone who's younger? And it's most certainly trending towards a younger demographic. And right here in West Michigan, we have two different colleges that have
yeah,
flight
we do.
schools that are teaching college kids on flying and getting them into commercial. And so a lot of times their aircraft are coming and going out of the local airport as well. So not only are you talking to general aviation pilots, or even uh, commercial pilots that are flying for corporate or private, but you're also talking to flight instructors and students as well. Maybe the student is working on their cross country. They may be 25 years old working on cross country. They are not picking up an airport directory from 1975, right?
No, they're not. And in fact, the other evening there was a ton of air traffic, and I looked up on FlightAware, and there was three planes from one of those local colleges,
Yeah,
and it was like 9 o'clock at night, and all three of them were doing touch and goes, all working together. So they all flew there because it's a nice cross country spot. So how do they
absolutely.
know?
Yep.
Pick your airport for that cross country leg that they need to check off or the other airport, right? Because they can choose. It's totally up to them. But yeah, it was like, man, there's a ton of air traffic. Looked it up. Yeah, it's three of them, all from the same school, working
Very cool.
together.
Very cool.
Eh, Yeah, and the other interesting thing on that article was women pilot topped $100,000 or 100,000 for the first time. So that's getting to be also a bigger percentage too, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good point too. So not only do your marketing demographics have to talk about the differences in age, differences in types of aircraft that could come and
Yeah,
going, but also in different types of genders as well, and making sure that you're making your messaging, your value proposition as very clear as possible, and try to make sure that you're capturing um, everyone that could be in the pilot seat, or planning a flight.
yeah, yeah. All so many things to consider now. So many things.
Yeah. So what's the solution here, Brandon? What's we've talked about kind of the problem, right? So what is the solution? How do I, if I'm an FBO, right? What am I supposed to do with this information we're telling them, right?
Right. So clearly, like we had talked about, the demographics are shifting. And so we got to keep that in mind. And most people today, they're using of these electronic sources to be able to do that flight planning. So when you are looking at your marketing, you want to be clear across the board. So you want to make sure that you do have a website that has the information needed, you know, current fuel prices, what services you have available at your particular FBO or MRO or at that airport, right? So you need to have that information easily found. But then it also needs to be in, ForeFlight and Garmin Pilot and there's Fly to Lunch and Sky Vector. There are a ton of different things. So you got to make sure that you have that correct information out to everybody. And I think the most important thing is what makes you different than the other airport next to you. What do you have that's different? Yes, fuel price is important, all that stuff. But there's got to be something that is special about unique to bring people to your airport. And that's one thing that you really want to make sure that you are communicating and you are clear on that this is what we have to offer. Because okay, you have fuel, great. They have fuel. It's about the same price. What's the difference? Like, why would I
Yeah.
want to go to one airport versus the other?
That's the value proposition, right? And about how long, let's say I'm scrolling through the website, right? About how long is it that I have as a pilot before I say, you know what, I've given up on this one. I'm going to go find somewhere else. I didn't find the information fast enough. The value proposition is not clear. About how long is that before I have to, make sure that my attention is grabbed and I see exactly what that airport is trying to sell me? How long of a scroll time
Yeah.
do I have to
Yeah.
before I move on?
Not long. The average for people like looking online at information, it's like 5 to 10 seconds. And
Wow.
that's it. It's
Yeah.
not a lot of time.
And I imagine the younger
You know?
person probably has even less time before they scroll on. I mean, when we started doing YouTube videos, they were 15, 20 minutes long. And then shorts came out and it's like, if you don't hook someone in like a couple seconds, 5 seconds may
It's
even
over.
be like too long. If you don't hook someone in like
Too
1,
long.
2, 3,
Yeah.
they're on to the next one. They swipe it and go into the next. So yeah, you have to, when you're putting the website together and developing your value
Yeah.
proposition and trying to communicate, you only have a few seconds to hook them, right? To get them interested and let them say, okay, what does this airport have? What are they trying to sell me? Why should I plan my trip to that location versus the one over there?
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to hook them quick and have that information up to date. Like I was playing around with Fly to Lunch at where different airports are that have lunch, and if it wasn't in there, right, you just skipped right over it, just because the information wasn't even there to begin with. So it's like, well, if I'm going to fly 2 hours on a leg, I'm going to want to get some food, top off of fuel, go to the bathroom. If it's not up to date, I skipped right over it, and I didn't even think twice about it.
And that's here. I kind of just thought of this as you were talking about that, right? So we're talking about websites,
Yeah.
but how many of these guys are probably sitting down at a PC or a laptop and looking at a website? They're probably not. They're probably looking on it on their phone or on
Yeah.
a tablet. So not
Yeah.
only do you need a regular old school website, you're going to need a mobile friendly website. And a lot of times what I find is a website that's really good on the computer, when you go to look it up on your phone, it's absolutely terrible. And you're not hauling a laptop or your PC around when you're
No.
flying. So if you're doing a cross-country trip that may have multiple stops on it, what are you going to be looking at when you're
Yeah.
going to be looking at your phone? That's where you're going to start to make some of your decisions at, right? You may even be looking at the phone while a plane is on autopilot. If you got Skylink or something like that, where you can
Yeah.
actually look at websites. So you need to have that capability.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as an FBO, let's put me in the FBO shoes here again. All right. I'm the fixed base operator. I'm the manager. I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. I'm listening to this podcast and I'm thinking, you talk to value propositions, things of that sort. But what do I need to do? And how do I put myself in the pilot's shoes? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good question, and I bet there's a lot of FBOs that are probably asking the exact same question. So grab your phone out, grab your tablet, launch some of these apps, go to your website, and look at it. Do they have that information? Go to plan that cross country flight and go, hey, what information, what does ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot or whoever, when I click on that airport, my airport, and click on the FBO, does it have the correct information? Does it show what the hours and what the current fuel price is? Does it have a link to the website so you can get more information? is it easily viewable on my phone? So you got to look at it from the pilot's perspective and go, okay, let's actually do this. Actually take the time, take a few minutes and go through this. Look at it as if you are, a corporate pilot and somebody's trying to come in to, we talked about that Gulf Stream earlier. You got to look at it from the different mission types and how do they plan their flight and their destination. So there's, in aviation, a lot of people just see airplanes coming and going, but we all know that there's so much more to it, so many
Absolutely.
missions,
Yeah.
and you gotta put yourself. So grab your laptop, grab your phone, your tablet, launch these apps, and actually sit down and pretend you're doing the flight planning for some of these different kinds of missions to see, oh, that's actually what's coming up. It's one thing to look at it on the back end, but what does my website actually look like? Does it look like it hasn't been updated in 20 years? So you need to look at it and make sure it's current and that it's easy for both on a computer and mobile. A lot of people are doing tablets because that's where they have their electronic flight bag.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's a matter of, you know, the website needs to be simple to use, simple
Yeah.
and quick and easy to see the information on. It has to work well on mobile, has to work well on phone and tablet, of course, PC, that type of thing as well. And you need to really have a very simple,
Yeah.
clear value proposition that instantly communicates to the pilot what this airport can bring to them. What am I bringing to the airport? Or what am I bringing
Hmm.
to the pilot if they select this airport? That's the value proposition. And we talked about you only have a few seconds to
You only have a
grab the
few
attention
seconds. Yeah.
and let them then go through, make sure it's current and up to date and reflective of really the current state of that airport. And
Yeah.
basically you're going to have to think of your FBO as running a business, right? You need to attract
Yes.
customers, and you
Yes.
need to get those customers to come in the door, and that takes a very simple and clear value proposition, and then of course meeting them on the media that they're on. Uh,
Yeah. And I
if
know we
they're online, at a computer or on a phone, you need to have something that communicates to both of those types of mediums.
Yeah, and I know we really focused on FBOs, but you can take that same idea and change it for flight schools, for charter operations and MROs, right? You need to get out there. Why should someone pick you? What is the information? Why should somebody pick you? And that's the most important thing. So we kind of took an example with FBOs, but it's pretty easy to see how you might be able to change that for, the different parts that may operate at an airport.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I think we've communicated. From my standpoint, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of the FBO here, this is starting to kind of make sense, right? Like I'm like, all right, it's more than you know just turning on the lights at the airport, calling it a day. There's a marketing strategy
Yes.
that goes along with this, and you have to think like a marketer. You have to think like a business person, and you need to attract customers, and those customers are pilots, and
Yes.
they have a very specific way they communicate,
Yeah.
and
Yes, they do.
you communicate along those same lines as well. So you got to be a marketer, and you got to understand the jargon. You got to understand your customer, and you got to understand what your customer is going to use to find you the airport. So yeah, I think
Indeed.
good stuff. I mean, I obviously we're gonna have a lot more discussion on this
Oh, yeah.
in the future. But yeah, let's I think why don't we hit a couple news articles as well here, because I know there's a few things you wanted to cover on that, right? So
Yeah, I did. So there's a couple quick news articles, and we'll be providing probably in the show notes and stuff links to all of this stuff, so you can find this information later. But there's been in the news a lot of information talked about ADSB and landing fees, and airports are actually starting to charge you landing fees based upon your ADSB information. So they'll just bill you. So just recently, Florida actually banned that, and they want to use other ways of charging landing fees. So they are the second state to have done that. Montana is the other one, And for Montana, it's under 9,000 pounds. And in Florida, it's under 12,500 pounds. So I think that's actually a really good thing. So you don't get like a surprise landing fee bill in the mail.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's amazing. And I've seen this airports that are probably within the kind of one fill up range of Oshkosh, right? Pretty soon
Yeah.
their landing fees go up. We saw it in the remember the Formula One race in
Oh
Las
my gosh.
Vegas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, their landing fees were astronomical.
Yes,
So
they are.
even if you have nothing to do with the event that's happening there, right? So
Hmm.
say you're a business person, you're flying there, you have business to take care of, and let's say I don't know, um, you're the toilet seat company, you're flying there to talk about toilet seats, and it just happens to be the same weekend that there's a sporting event, and the landing fees are outrageous, and you're like, I have nothing to do with that
Exactly.
sporting event. I just have a meeting that happens to be in the area. So it's a little price gouging, honestly. I mean, I get it. I understand it. It's like Uber, or something
But
like
yeah.
that, that their
Yeah.
prices go skyrocket. You have, high demand, things like that. But, I think that there's still I think a lot of pilots will clearly see that for what it is, and they may schedule completely around it or find another
Yes.
airport. Say, you know what? I can land over here and take ground transportation to my
But yeah.
destination rather than paying a ridiculous landing fee. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I can see
Yeah.
that. I think what Florida's doing is the right thing on this one. I think that
Yes.
I think from the general aviation community, I think that makes sense. Um, yeah,
Yes. Yeah, I think it does. That's not the purpose of ADSB. So let's not try to use it just to
yeah,
monetize even more from it. Like let
yeah,
ADSB be what it was designed to do. Right. Let's figure out another way to charge for landing fees. Because I get it. You got to have a landing fee. Totally makes sense. But
yeah,
ADSB is maybe not the right path for that.
yeah. And
And
so if you do a touch and go, do you have to pay a landing fee? I honestly don't know. I don't know. I've never had to pay a landing fee. I have no idea. So I'm like, hey, if I do a touch and go, or maybe I'll just fly down the runway, shoot an approach, and just keep it from touching the wheels.
right.
Can I get out of a landing fee?
That's a great question. I think it really depends upon the airport. I know I've flown into a couple different airports, and sometimes they'll have it where they'll waive the landing fee if you buy fuel from them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, that's kind of an interesting, topic for another day. But yeah,
Yes,
that's actually an
yes,
interesting approach there where, it's like, hey, if you use some of our services, I'm going to waive that. It's like a parking garage, right?
yes,
Hey, you're coming to this event, but you could get your parking comped or the hotel, right? Say,
yeah.
hey, if you're not going to use any of my services, I'm going to collect that money.
Now,
Use some of
now
my
we're gonna.
services, well, I might cut you a deal.
Yeah, yeah. And I've even seen it where landed at an airport, and they're like, oh yeah, there's a landing fee, but nobody actually knew how to collect it. And
Fantastic. I'd
so,
be like, yeah, I'll go get my checkbook out of the airplane there
yeah.
and Blues
No,
Brothers my way out of that one.
yeah. So it was like, oh, there went some more revenue. Just walked off because
Yeah,
you didn't
exactly.
actually know how to collect it. So that's another interesting topic that I've actually seen where they were like, "Oh, yeah," but they didn't actually know how to do it. So that's interesting. And you'd also mentioned about Starlink real briefly, and I actually
Yeah,
had a
yeah.
news article on that. Is so there's actually really two parts to this. Is Starlink raised their speed that you could get their, I think, their Roam package, which was then all of a sudden way out of the speed limits of general aviation, and the cost went like ridiculously high. I don't remember. It was like $1,000 a month if you wanted to go faster than 100 miles an hour. So great if you in a motorhome, not so good if you're in basically any general aviation airplane. So there was a huge outcry online, and Starlink actually changed that. They
Good, good.
actually did bring it back down, and they actually made something specifically for aviation now, which I think is great. And I even saw Cirrus is now offering a factory Starlink mount, so
Oh,
you can
very cool.
actually from Cirrus get a factory mount to plug in and have it look nice instead of just sitting on top of your instrument panel so it can reach the satellites.
Yeah, I was actually on a business call once with a gentleman who was flying his Cirrus over the Rocky Mountains and was in the meeting as a Microsoft Teams meeting. He was participating in the meeting while the aircraft was on autopilot, and the phone was propped up on a mount, and he was part of the meeting. And he said, "Hey, it's Starlink. I have a connection here with Starlink, and I can join the meeting while I am flying and the aircraft's on autopilot." Pretty cool, actually.
That is really cool. Yeah, join the meeting wherever you're at.
Yeah, exactly.
You can
Not
travel.
that I really want to fly and have to deal with a Teams call. That seems terrible. I'd rather just fly and not have a Teams call. But for people who do need to stay connected and things like that, I think that's a great service to be able to have. And not only just from a work perspective, but also from just a safety perspective. And, there's another way where someone may be using Starlink to research their next landing spot. And we talked about kind of going full circle.
Weather.
They may be checking for a landing spot and find you at the airport while they're in the air.
Yeah. All of a sudden, your 10-year-old son's like, I got to go to the bathroom, and you better find an airport quick.
Yeah. Indeed. So
the only other article that I had in here was talking about the 100 octane low lead transition, and that's we can get into a really long discussion about that, but and this is also a topic that I know that has been going on for decades, I think, at this point. So I guess we'll see if it's actually going to happen.
Yeah, what is it? 2030 is the deadline for it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. We'll see if it actually comes to fruition by then. I remember like in 2016, they said like by 2020, all semi-trucks will be autonomous and self-driving cars. It's like the Jetsons all of a sudden. And 2020 hit, and all we ended up with was COVID and not much else. We'll see. It's a little bit different when you actually have mandates and things like that, but a lot of times government mandates and other type of things get pushed out. Now, whether or not we get different states have different rules, we'll have to just see. I think it's a topic for another time that I think we really need to kind of deep dive into, and not for today's episode.
Not because that's talking about fuels and engines. That's a whole interesting topic in its own. So something to keep on your radar, especially as FBO and carrying fuel. This is out there, and there are fuels that they're testing. So this is somewhat coming. We'll see how it actually all pans out. So, but we'll maybe dive deeper into that a different week. Yeah. So we're gonna. The last thing I wanted to talk about real quick, because we ran out of time last week, but I do want to hit it this week real quick. Is a book. Mentioned it last week. American Icon. It's Alan Mulally and his fight to save Ford Motor Company by Bruce Hoffman. And
Bryce Hoffman.
Bryce Hoffman, yes.
Right.
And so it's not an aviation book, but I do think it's probably one of the best leadership.
Let's hold on. You say it's not an aviation book.
You're right. You're right.
Where did Alan Mulally come from?
Boeing.
And Boeing is a what kind of company?
An aircraft manufacturer.
Yeah. So, yes. There is some aviation.
There absolutely
in this book. So don't just fully discount it as car only.
Yeah. Good point. And he was the one that really led Boeing through the post 9/11.
Yes.
When commercial aviation changed a lot post 9/11. So he was the one that was leading Boeing when that happened. So, just a great leadership book. And Ford was not in great shape when Alan came to Ford.
No, not at all. We were extra special close to it just because we had a family business that was related to it, and we had some involvement with Ford as well. So, yeah, unfortunately, we knew that all too well. But from a business standpoint, it's really a fantastic book. I have read it, I think, twice. I've let some of my coworkers borrow the same book as well. And so, yeah, it's not really an aviation book. It's not a military history book. You're not learning about P-51 Mustangs in World War II. It's a very different type of book. But I think from a standpoint of good business leadership and really trying to get an out-of-control company back under control again and find their way out of a pretty bad crisis.
Yes.
I think the book is outstanding. Like I said, read it a few times, highly recommend it. It's one of my all-time favorite books.
Yeah, and he had talked about creating one Ford, and everybody understood it. And we talked about clarity before, and that's really kind of one of the important things that he talked about was clarity beats complexity every time. And he wanted the culture at Ford to have that clarity and understood what one Ford meant. And so that's, he did a lot of great things. Highly recommend that book. It is just fantastic. You can learn about how he handled the business plan reviews and understanding how he changed the culture to really rebuild Ford into, turning a profit, right?
Yeah.
and saving it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, great book. Highly recommend it. I think maybe the next time we'll try to pick one that's a little bit more aviation centered. Yeah. But since this podcast has a lot more to do with marketing and business, and it's not just to talk airplanes, that book is a fantastic read, and I would highly recommend to read it and understand it and look at it through the lens of a business and look at it through the lens if you're an FBO. Looking at it from the standpoint of how do I apply the lessons that are in that book to my day-to-day operations here at the airport.
Yeah. So true. So highly recommend it. Pick it up. Take a listen. I'm a big audiobook person. I think I listened to it at least twice, and I have the physical, and I think I read it cover to cover as well. So listen to it, read the physical book, however you want to do that. That's up to you. Like I said, I'm a big audiobook person. That's how I do most of my reading is through listening. So, so man, we covered a lot in this episode. So I'm hoping that you guys got some really good information, something that you can take away from this podcast that you can start to apply today. That's the goal. Take something from today and start to apply it to your business, your FBO charter operation, to help get the word out and get people to come to you versus somebody else.
Yeah, great way to wrap up episode 2 here. Looking forward to getting back together to talk about episode 3. So keep your eye out for that. So yeah, I think with that, I think it's time to wrap up episode 2 and call this one done and dusted. How about that, Brandon?
That sounds good. We will see you next week on Turning Base.
All right, have a good one. Thanks for flying with us on Turning Base. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your team. Want more tips and tools for marketing your aviation business? Visit us at readymarketing.net. Until next time, keep your wings level, your message clear, and your altitude high.